In politics, you're either on message or you are losing. Let's get to it. Welcome to On Message, a weekly look at where the battle lines are drawn and who is winning the war of words. This week, fire and water. I mentioned a few weeks ago that the Cox administration was doing a pretty darn good job of getting out ahead of the dire drought situation in our state. The governor took the steps of cutting watering down to 2 days each week on state properties and is doing everything he can to use his bully pulpit to make it cool to have a brown lawn. Practicing what he preaches, the governor has even proudly displayed the dry grass at the state capitol. Other elected officials have done a good job of putting the water shortage front and center as well, including Speaker of the House Brad Wilson, who published an op-ed in the Deseret News highlighting the shortage and encouraging all Utahns to do their part. But water isn't the only issue facing the state this summer. A dry June makes for a summer of high risk of fire, and that comes at a particularly tricky point on the calendar for politicians. A year ago, in the heart of the pandemic, Independence Day and Pioneer Day celebrations were canceled. From the release of the first COVID vaccine, elected officials, including President Biden and Governor Cox, have pointed to the 4th of July as a date we could all look forward to celebrating together. Well, life got back to normal in Utah ahead of that schedule, but now the dry conditions have pushed fireworks, and more specifically calls to ban fireworks, to the forefront. And that seems particularly unfortunate considering we all deserve to have a nice, traditional celebration after what I think we can admit was a rough 2020. And that's left a lot of politicians in the difficult position of either taking a stance that won't sit well with a lot of constituents or finding a nice way to tell people something they don't want to hear. The governor, for his part, has banned fireworks anywhere he can and then pointed out that he doesn't have the authority to do it without legislative approval statewide. Legislative leaders, few of whom want to ban fireworks, have taken steps to empower local officials to make the call. And some mayors, like Salt Lake City's Aaron Mendenhall, have banned fireworks, while others have opted to do nothing out of the ordinary. So, what's the lesson? Sometimes you have to highlight the good of your decision and downplay the not so good. There are people who want the governor to ban fireworks statewide, and there are also people who would be outraged if he did so. It is 2021 after all, and outrage is kind of what we do. So he bans them where he can, but he doesn't overreach. So he can highlight that he did what he could, but didn't ignore the separation of powers, big for his base. The legislature can also point out how much they value local control. And local control, meaning mayors, can do what's best for their cities or at least ignore common sense at their own peril. There's not always a perfect message to get you out of a tough situation, but unless you are purposely doing something objectively wrong or just downright evil, there is almost always a way to highlight the good and ignore the not so good of your decisions. It's what we in politics call spin. That's it for this week. More On Message in the next issue of the Utah Political Underground. Make sure you visit the site and sign up for our weekly email update. You can find more of these On Message videos as well as in-depth Utah political stories and analysis, plus podcasts and so much more at utahpoliticalunderground.com.